on these shows and displays. That is not Tachi dress. And Roy says he got all that stuff from Bannerman's. He had the stuff because he was putting on shows. So he was doing this equivalent of like Buffalo Bill Wild West shows. Over in the auditorium, he'd go over there, they'd come over here. But that was never their natural stuff. Well, and that's a good thing because they couldn't put the shows on. Naturally, they didn't wear clothes out here. And that's because it was hot. The young men, until they reached puberty, young kids, they wore no clothes whatsoever. And if you became an old man, and Roger and I aren't there yet, but you became an old man, you couldn't, it was too hard to dress up, you also didn't wear any clothes. So that's the clothing. There was none. The women made some skirts, they made some tops and blouses, but the guys didn't wear much. In between time, they just put together just enough to cover the front private parts. They didn't wear pants, they didn't even wear like the Plains Indians wore breechcloth. They didn't wear anything. They just covered their private parts. Okay, marriage. Apache Indians married, and they weren't monogamous. They could be. Polygamy was allowed with the Apache Indian tribe, but you didn't see it very, very often. It was more of an exception. And why was that? It's one reason. The main reason is there weren't that many Apache women around, so you couldn't do that. The Apache tribe has been found to be one of the only tribe of the Yokuts. So Apache is a sublet of the Yokuts. So what does Yokut mean? The Yokuts have the largest area in the state of California and were the largest number for years, but they had all these sub-outlets. And Yokut is their word that just means we're people. We're all people. Apache then gets into the different dialects and sorting it out, and that all spoke Penutian language, because everybody that spoke something similar. A lot of the people could speak 4 of the different dialects, and they say they could all understand each other. Colbert says no, they couldn't all understand each other. They were in different dialects. The smart ones could speak up to 4 different dialects. They could understand a lot of what was said, but they didn't know the other words.
So what was the language base?
Well, they call it Penutian. Yeah, the map that shows what everybody spoke, it's names that they can't base off of. They surveyed all the Indians, and they put, there's others out of California they put that have a similar base language, and they put them all in these different names, and it has nothing to do necessarily with your tribe. And then finding out what the Tachi is, and like I say, all this stuff over here, this is all Tachi land. And reason 10 is that Pozo-Chene is, they didn't go any further. They didn't go any further west. They didn't go look at it. So now they're making guesses of it. So I hope somebody here is inspired. Life is all, and this is like a jigsaw puzzle. You can get the big picture, and you can see in this jigsaw puzzle there's an American flag in there. But is American flag in this puzzle? Is it hanging on the building? Is it in a parade? Or is it even better yet, is it hanging on a fire truck in the parade? You don't know until you put all the other pieces together. Hope somebody will pick that up and do that. Joe?
Gordon, do you have any information from the Coalinga group?
No.
There's some artifacts that were donated here in the name of Coalinga. They're actually stuff that my dad had, and he donated. He was part of that group, and there was a group from the state of California that was coming through, trying to discern where some of the sites were, so when they were out fighting wildfires, they didn't decimate them with bulldozers and such. And I've got something on my phone here that I can send to somebody. You can take a look at it.
And so that's the other, thank you, Joel, that's an important piece here, or leading. So the other reason stuff isn't there, to give you an example. So in 1990, I'm driving my firehouse pickup truck around doing my fire prevention, and I go up the truck route and I get to Elm, and I just get up past the intersection there, and I see a guy laying on the sidewalk. And then I see two guys I know from CDF, two of the chiefs, and they're standing there like this, looking over. Well, his back is to me, and he's in the fetal position, and that's all I can see. He's in the fetal position, laying there on the sidewalk. So I pull over, turn on the red lights, get out. I says, I got my radio here. You guys never called for an ambulance? The guy needs an ambulance? And they just look at me funny. And I go, is he okay? And they go, yeah. And I walk over to his back and I look, he's laying on the side and he has a camera. He's taking pictures there on the sidewalk. Right there, there's some rocks there. Some big brown, light brown rocks, and he's taking pictures, and I go, oh, I see what he's doing. But he was all scrunched up, trying to hold himself still. But, you know, when he had a real camera before these, and he's taking, and he's there, okay, he's taking the pictures, so they were laughing. So they said, so I introduced myself and said, I thought you guys need an ambulance. I'm Gordon Oakley. Oh, you're Gordon Oakley? Yes, okay. So you work at Fire Brant? Yes, here's where I'm at. Well, the guys, yeah, I know. Well, 6 months later, these guys all come to the fire station. Can we talk to you in your office? Close the door and they say, okay, Mr. Oakley, how long have you been desecrating Indian sites?
Oh, brother.
And that's what I said, desecrating Indian sites. Okay, what do you know that I don't? So I'm thinking, I go, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, well, there's more than one Gordon Oakley. I said, yeah, my dad and my son. He said, yep. But you're the one we're looking for. What? There's pictures of you and the Coalinga record out with Bill Kane looking for Indian stuff. What did you do and where did you go? And I'm going, wow, 20 years later, now I'm being taken to task because I said, Gordon Kane got the Boy Scout leaders to take us, and we were his slave labor to go dig up the countryside. And I said, the first place we went was up to the Nunes Ranch. They had a spring there. And so Gordon Kane was sure that if they had a spring there, then Indians had to live there because there was water. We dug for a couple hours and we didn't find anything. And so I was getting bored, so we had some little flat rock. I picked one up, took another rock, and I carved a little deer out on it, put antlers on him, and just laid that up there. A guy from the Coalinga record came and took a picture and then took my name. Oh, they found this. Well, when Gordon Kane come over like that, picked it up, it took him up 2 minutes. This isn't old, this isn't what they do. Well, so they put me in the paper. Well, CDF looked at it, and they didn't see any humor in it whatsoever. I can't believe that. Well, then they asked about, you guys also went somewhere else. I said, we left there, and in the afternoon, we went back behind 25D, somewhere on Standard Oil property, to something that he called Little Donut Rock. But I don't know, I didn't even know there was a Little Donut Rock, but we were there digging. What did you find there? I said, oh, he found some beads and a few other things, but that was it. Okay, we maybe come back to talk to you. I said, okay, well, call ahead and make an appointment, please. I won't be here. So you can't really do that stuff. So that guy from CDF was laying there and taking that picture. Those rocks had been hauled out of Los Gatos Canyon by a landscape contractor who had redecorated the coaling station B apartments and used that out in the front corners, and they were full of petroglyphs. And so I said, okay, it's time for me to leave. I don't know who took it, I don't know anything about it. Roger found out later. So while I do research and look at things, Roger's a boots on the ground guy. He does what's legal now. He goes out with BLM and these other state representatives. Nancy's had them come to their place, and they go look at stuff, they record it, and they do it. But everything's recorded, everything's out. But you or I can't find any of that information. It is put on websites that are locked. And it's locked so that you or I can't find it, so we don't go there and do the same thing. Start desecrating the areas, taking things, and removing things. Yes, sir.
Just to follow up to that, the photos that my dad took of those rocks years ago were actually enabled them to replace those exactly when they were discovered.
Yeah, and so they were, I don't know whatever happened to that landscaping contractor, but he
Got a big fine.
he was in big serious trouble.
General public doesn't understand the significance of the exact position of those rocks. we were up in a couple of canyons looking and run across things that we don't understand, but we find rocks set in position and alignments, and they all went to true north. Now, did they have compasses? Well, that would have gone to magnetic north. How would they have known? But if people are moving things around, or if we disturb something we don't understand,
Oh, yeah.
then we will never understand it.
Yeah.
So it's why we try to leave things exactly how we found them.
Yes. And so that's the other reason, when you find something out, you gotta compile the information and stuff, because when the government does it, it's all locked away now. They know where it's at, and they use it for the environmental impacts, where people can build, where they can't build, and things are at. But they won't publish it, and they won't put it on public domain, because they're afraid they're gonna lose part of their cultural heritage. Did you have a comment, Miss Nancy?
No,
Okay,
no.
okay. So, let's see, what else did they cover here? Only to the Tachi Indians. Their tribes ran with 2 chiefs. They always had 2 chiefs. And when you get married, you don't get to live in your village anymore. You go live with your in-laws. You go to their village. And
The men did.
they did not, Tachis did not let you intermarry. There wasn't all this, they did this. That was forbidden. You had to, that's why they wouldn't let you stay in that village to keep procreating. You went and lived wherever you found your wife's village was at and where she was at. So you didn't stay there, so you didn't have this problem. And so until you were very removed, some of what they do now, and cousins, you couldn't do that. You couldn't marry into close family relationships, and they monitor that by keeping you out. It's wherever your wife's family was at. That's where you went to live. So the 2 chiefs had equal authority, but sometimes the chiefs then had control over the males that were from the other village, and then the other chief talked to the families that were from this village. The chief always lived in the center of the village, and he had his what I'll call ambassadors that lived on each end of the village. And those people would go out to the other Indian tribes and set up the festivals or the agreements, whatever. So when people came to trade their goods, only the chief could do the trading. But you brought your stuff to those guys, they brought it up, they laid it out, the chief went through all the stuff. And then they went out to a place a little further east at Pozo Chene. And then the chiefs all got together from the other tribes. The other people could watch. They weren't allowed to make comment. They weren't allowed to say they wanted this or that. All the negotiation was done by the different chiefs. And they said that was peculiar, very peculiar to the Yokuts to the Tachis that were here, and having the 2 chiefs, and because they had a society that was called a moiety of 2, that they had to make the arrangements for the 2 that were there. So the Indians from the coast, there were 2 ways that you got into the valley. One, of course, was 152 coming across Los Banos. They followed that old grade there. The other one, Roger's going to talk about. There was only 2 ways to get here. They traded, so they traded the asphaltum, but the Tachi Indians went up to Oil City and got the seepages there. But they also got seepages down the road. Where in Kings County does it seep out at? Down there at Tar Canyon, right? It's drive alongside the road, there's pools of oil. Down in the McKittrick area, it's the same way. Well, so they didn't just use it for their baskets, they wrapped those balls up and then wrapped them up in ferns, and they traded them. And that way there, it wouldn't get stuck to everything. And so when you came over from the coast, then you traded your shells, your abalone shells, your clam shells, your mussel, your bivalve shells. for asphaltum. They also transferred from obsidian. When the people came over from the east, in the Sierras, they brought their obsidian over. I do have a couple of broken that were like, they were larger, so they weren't arrowheads, they're like spear points, but they weren't obsidian. And in the 70s, when I was going to college, during summer I'd work up at Shaver Lake at Boy Scout camp. One of the scout leaders in Sanger, he was a Native American, and he spent 3 summers taking me around and showing me things and showing where. So I showed him this. This sure looks like the back of, he says it is. It's chert. It's a green color stuff. It's chert. And he said they could, out here, they could get chert when they had to wait for obsidian. And that chert came from the gravel pit out there, back when Owl Folsom Rock owned it. And they brought it, it was dug up there, the city bought these truckloads, and back then, the alleys were still dirt, they didn't pave alleys back then. And they would just come and fill the potholes in, and when the city truck had that dump truck come dump it and they leveled it out, I went out there and I started thinking, well, this looks like one of these arrowheads has got there. This piece here does too. And sure enough, they were. So that's how I know they came out of the gravel pit from Moscatus Canyon. They had in some ceremony, the Apache Indians had, and I don't even really know what the stuff is, I don't know what it does. I'm sure Ed used to cultivate it, but gypsum weed. They had a gypsum weed ceremony. When a man reached puberty, you got a gypsum weed ceremony. And that stuff would make you hallucinate. And then during your hallucinations, then you were to tell the elders what you hallucinated on. That was that was you hallucinated, and that was being revealed to you, your plan for your future and what you were going to do. They also had, and it was peculiar out here, the Yokas, believe it or not, and I don't know where they got them from, but they had rattlesnake ceremonies. Yeah. So where's find rattlesnake? The other place that's common for rattlesnake ceremonies is the Hopi Indians. They do it. But out here you would do it, and they did it every spring. And the medicine men would do it, and they would go, and they would, just before the rattlesnakes came out, they would go chant and dance around this hole that they knew that where the snake den was at. And they said, with their chanting and stuff, pretty soon a big lizard would come out, and then all these snakes. Each of the medicine men would then claim the snake that they had dreamed about. And they would do this dance around them, and that was to protect the village for all the rest of the year so that the rattlesnakes wouldn't bite somebody in the village and kill them. So they did their own version. They had a basket, a weed basket that was full of feathered down that the snakes would go into, and that's how they would catch them. And they said they didn't have to catch them; they would just automatically go in there, and then they'd have them in these baskets, and then they'd do the rest of their ceremonies. Now, one thing that surprised me, it's in here. I won't read you the whole story, but there were special people, and they said this is common throughout all the Indian tribes. News to me that the people in the tribe that were homosexual, they had transvestites. There were 2 jobs that were given to you. One job was every tribe had a clown, and what we call in school a class clown. Every ceremony, everything, they duplicated it, but it's something they made fun of, these ceremonies. And why they did that, don't know, but that was their job. Only the ones that were transvestite, homosexual, their job was they were in charge of all the funerals. If somebody died, they're the only one who got to go touch them, pick them up, prepare them, and either bury them or burn them, whichever way they were going to be disposed of. And that was here, and it says this was common throughout all the tribes in the United States. All news to me, it's in the book. And that's what they did. That surprises me, that the class of the breakdown of how their society was labeled, that they had those distinctions. And so you didn't inherit that position to handle the dead bodies. It was a choice made when you were younger. And if you were, they said if you were acting in a strange way, then whatever they define as a strange way, then you were, that's how you got that job. The chief's jobs were through lineage and how they were tracked. Let's see, what else was in there? Oh, warlike, people talk about warlike. The Yolkas were not a warlike people. That's why they called themselves Yolkas, because they were people. We're all equal. We're all people here. We're all working together. You hear a lot of time, oh, the California Indians were gatherers, hunters, gatherers, and other stuff. Well, they found out it's like, how do you hunt and gather acorns in Coalinga? Are there a lot of acorns up Los Gatos Canyon?
Yes.
Yeah, because of the oak tree. So there, over in Visalia, so to get that, they'd have to trade for that stuff too. Otherwise, they're doing the same thing like the ducks. They're eating they're eating bugs. They caught the field mice. They caught the gophers, the snakes. They prepare all that. So they didn't have a really, really good diet. So, and that's the difference between when you're going and you find a cemetery like that, you dig it out and you just collect the beads, the shells, and a few things in the bones. But when they find these and they're underway for anthropology, they actually take samples and that stuff, and they find out what was in those bites. What were they digesting? What were they eating? How did these people get along? And you know, and back then nobody's lying about it, but it'd be the same today. What if they're digging up people out at the cemetery now, and then some family comes in and says, that's the bones of my grandfather. What are you doing with that in the cabinet here? Well, that's the way the Native Americans feel, and they have every right to feel that way. And going through and doing that kind of stuff is very interesting. Does anybody have any questions for my part? I don't want to keep you here all day.
I just wanted to ask you a question. I don't know the answer to this or anything. I don't know anything about it really, but I read a lot of history. And the old rancheros, say from Chelam on, would complain about the Indians from the Tulare coming to raid their ranches. Have you ever read something like that?
No.
That's after they became horseback Indians too.
It could be, that's why there was a lot of sediment. The other reason why it's hard to find stuff, but this area was fortunate. Has anybody heard of the governor named Burnett? He was governor before the state actually even was a state, when it was a territory. And he had a very malicious and sinister plan. When he was governor of the state, and then he left, but he was still a legislator. In 1851, he gave a report on like the